Hello friends, Jeff V here from Squadron. Welcome back in our 5th chapter of the online build of the Mosquito. If you missed the inbox review and the previous chapters, don't worry about it, they're still available. Just click on the link on top of your screen. If you don't have a Mosquito yet and you still want to acquire a kit, we still have them available. Click on the link on the left and it will guide you directly to the page. Don't forget, if I was not clear or you have some questions or concerns, there is also a link that you can click and it will guide you directly to to the help desk. Just send me a question and I will get back to you as soon as possible. In this chapter, we're going to talk a little bit more about weathering. In the previous chapters, we explained about applying the base coat, applying the top coat, the different layers of color. After about 24-48 hours of drying time, it's time to apply some weathering. So I'll show you a couple tricks of weathering techniques, and especially how to apply a wash, how to do some pre-shading, and then in a subsequent chapter I will explain about detail painting. So let's get to the first thing, which is applying a wash. So grab your brushes and just follow along. The first thing we need to do is make sure we got everything prepared and on our table. Since we're going to do a wash today, it is the first, you can say, layer of weathering is going to be the wash. This will also take care of the pre-shading. You have to make sure there are different kind of washes out there. We have the Vallejo washes and we also have, for instance, oil paint washes. Personally, I like the oil paint because I've been doing this for over 30 years and I'm accustomed to it, so it works very well for me. But again, it's up to the modeler himself. If you're comfortable with more using acrylic washes, that should be your choice. The oils I'm gonna use today is Winsor Newton. I got the number 35 raw umber, and also we're going to use a little bit of the burnt sienna number 2. Both are from Winsor Newton. You can find them in craft stores like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. First of all, you need also make sure that you have a little cup of thinner, and in this case I'm going to use Squadron Products thinner. This is necessary to mix it with the raw umbers and also to clean your brushes eventually, or to moisten your brushes when you try to shade. So the first thing we need to do is take a piece of paper or a piece of scrap plastic sheet and squirt some of the raw umber on there, just a little tiny bit. Another thing is very necessary, make sure you get some good quality brushes out there. These, I show you a few, you need at least one fine brush, either a 0 or a number 1 or a 00. It really doesn't make much of a difference. Just have one of the fine brushes ready. Then also a couple flat brushes. In this case I use the Kolinsky martyr, but you can actually also use less expensive brushes like this here. This basically comes from Master Tools. So just make sure you have a few on your table. First thing we're going to do is we're going to dip our very fine brush into the thinner, and then also, let's say, we're going to apply some raw umber, and then just gently follow the contours of any detail that's on there. It doesn't matter if it's a little sloppy, because eventually you will fade it out or blend it in. This is also the reason why it's so important to make sure that your base coat, your top coat, and your varnish is dry. So I advise to, after you airbrushed everything, to just put it away for about 48 hours at least, just to make sure. Make sure you got underneath all the crevices and the creases, and wherever you see detail, apply some of the wash. The good thing with oil paint is that as long as you keep it moist, you can keep applying it and keep altering it. And don't try to do big surfaces. Try to do a little area at a time. After you applied it, let it at least sit for maybe a minute and then try to blend it. Make sure that your bigger brush is really dry and just keep working it until you're satisfied, until you get the right amount of shading and blending going on. If in a corner or in a crevice, or you think it's too dark and your oil paint starts drying real fast, it's no big deal to moisten the tip of your brush again and try to dissolve the oil paint. The other side. The main thing is that you keep painting until you're satisfied. Just keep adding the raw umber, keep blending it until you get the right shading, the right effect. Don't rush it. Again, when you apply too much raw umber and it dries, just moisten your brush again and try to just spread it out, blend it out. Make sure that all the corners, all the crevices, all the ridges, that there is some shading in there. As you can see here, it makes your weathering later on a lot easier. That's why I like to work with raw umber and the oil paints especially, because you can keep painting. As long as you keep it moist, you can keep painting until you get the right result. I think I'm already there. I once drunk from mistaken my cup for my paint mix and I drank it. Turpentine. Didn't go very well. I had a big jar like this and I had a glass of Coke and I wasn't thinking, so I bought and I took a mouthful. I didn't swallow it, but I took a mouthful and I spit it out, but oh, not good at all. That was a scary moment. Well, the best brushes to use is a flat brush, a number 6 or a number 4 are preferable. So I got a number 8 here. It all depends on the surface area. If it's a small surface, you go with a smaller brush, of course. If it's a bigger area, you go with a bigger. Always make sure you keep your brushes dry, your main brushes, because that's what you use to spread the oil paint out. You actually are dry brushing the oil paint until you get nuances of shade. And again, if you run into a problem where it is a little bit too dry, you just moisten the tip a little, not much, just a little, and then you can dissolve the oil paint there and make it blend in more. You do not want to end up with streaks or stripes. It all needs to be one blend. This looks about right for here. And I can't emphasize enough, some guys, they get excited and they do all the paint work and they can't wait, and then they don't respect the drying time, and then you run into a problem, because once you poke through the layer of the flat coat, that might end up in a world of hurt, and you're really get yourself in trouble. Once you brush through the layer of flat coat, let it at least dry 48 hours, and then you're really safe. Sometimes you spend weeks and months painting something and it looks really good, and then you say, okay, I spend a month or 2 months doing this, and then you can sell it for a couple $100, because I'm sure that's not what you want to hear. But it's not as recognized as painting, you know, people don't understand it. I tried to, a long time ago, I tried to sell it as three-dimensional art, and I sold a few, but most people don't understand. They all consider it like it's a toy. Applying a wash around very small detail, very intricate detail, can be very rewarding. Again, you don't really have to be careful when you apply it, because eventually you will start blending it later with the dry brush. The best paint brushes are the ones that are made out of red sable, especially the Kolinsky. Vallejo just recently came out with a whole array of brushes, so I'm trying these and I must say that I'm very pleased. The one I'm using right now is the number 1. The average brush you use, especially the fine brushes, are like a number 1, number 2, a 0, a double 0. But for this, for applying washes and all, I like the number 1. Again, don't be afraid to try something. I know that after you build your model, you super detail the cockpit, and then you put a top coat in it and the layers of varnish. And then finally everything is dry and everything looks pristine, and then you have to apply a wash, which makes it look a little scary in the beginning. But if you do it right and you respect your dry times, everything will come out fabulous. Like I said, it will become very rewarding, especially on small and intricate detail, but also after you, like we're doing the seat now of the Mosquito and the bulkhead, these pieces, some of these pieces were made out of metal. Although the Mosquito was mostly a wooden built airplane with 75, 80, 90% of its components were made out of wood. The pilot seat and the bulkhead were made out of metal. After we're done with the fading and spreading out the wash, we'll apply like a metallizer. And once you metallize it, and this is going to be a topic for another chapter, you will see that everything pops out the way it should. You really achieve a realistic look. Again, try only to do small areas. Don't try to do it all at once. The only disadvantage that you might have, and it's not really a disadvantage, it's just something that you have to be aware about. When you apply the wash, everything has to happen within the hour, let's say, because if you walk away, if you, let's say, apply a wash, a ground wash, and you let it dry and you forget about it, if you stay away for an hour or longer, 90% you run into trouble, because the oil paint will dry and become like a permanent dry, and it's very hard to correct that. My advice is to start with small areas that you can control within a certain time limit, and not to be surprised later on by having a wash applied that you can't get off anymore and is impossible to work on. I'm doing the shelf right now of the radio compartment. Lots of detail on there, lots of detail that can be made prominent or pop up with the application of the right amount of wash and shading. Again, if you make like a mistake or something, just get some extra thinner on your brush and wipe it away. Now let's go back to the previous one. As you can see, it's drying up, and you can already see some of the shading that only needs a little bit of help. Make also sure that for the first brush stroke with a dry brush you do, that your brush is actually clean and dry. I'm already getting some nice results here. It's going to be very easy to apply the other techniques later on, because I already got a really nice platform for my weathering. As you can see, it's not all that difficult, and I'm not all that cautious either. I mean, although there's a lot of detail, if you glued everything right, it can withstand some pressure from on your brush without breaking stuff off. And if it breaks, you just glue it back on. It looks about right. Maybe a little bit more here. Should not have said that. Thing broke off. I'll glue that back on later. Again, if you think that your wash is already drying and you have a hard time in blending it, or moisten the tip of your brush a little bit. That way it will dissolve again and you can correct it. A little bit more. The whole idea is to get a lot of contrast. Repeat this on the floor and radio compartment. I'm pushing my brush real hard right now, especially on the radio shelf. There is no glued on detail on there, so you can't break anything. The amount of wash, it all depends on the molder himself. If he wants to get it darker and more dirty looking, you just reduce the mixture, but I like it really well warm. Always gives the best results. Your main concern or your main goal should be creating depth. Again, guys, this is trial and error. The more you do it, the better you will become. You just have to look for the right amount of mix, the right blend, the right drying time. It's got already a nice look to it, so it's going to be very easy to finish this later on. It's looking real nice. Once all the detail is installed and all the cables, the hoses, the gauges, all the little black boxes, when everything is painted up, it's going to look really, really nice. Again, respect your drying time. Make sure that you have a couple of these brushes handy so you can switch, because it's very important that they stay dry as much as possible and clean. As you can see, I use my hands to wipe off any excess of the oil paint. It's not advisable, but you know, it's accessible and it's there. As you can see, if you keep rubbing it, it blends and it creates this perfect shading. You don't have any streaks or any stripes, it's just one fluent shade. These tips are good for all the components of the cockpit. After we are done, and also after the detail painting with all the cables in the boxes and whatnot, we might have to come back to this way of shading, just to get some extra dimension out of there. But again, we'll come back in the next chapter on that. First of all, now after the wash, we need to let it dry, and then we can start detail painting. So okay guys, this is it for now. Hope you learned a little bit about how to apply a wash on your cockpit. In next chapter, we'll talk a little bit more about detail painting, how to accentuate the cables, the black boxes, the harness, safety belts, etc. So until then, Mk.VI here signing off. It's like a lobster, as long as you throw them in hot water, they will... What are we talking about, actually?